Welcome to Coronavirus Impact. I'm Francine Schertzer. Our first guest today on the phone is Nathan Maines, CEO of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you.
Earlier this week, the governor extended the time period that Pennsylvania schools are to remain closed. What kind of reaction is that receiving?
Well, I think it wasn't completely unexpected by districts. If you watch the news and see what's happening around the world, obviously everyone was hopeful we could get back as soon as possible, but recognizing that it's a serious health threat. I think districts were already taking a lot of steps towards being able to operate in a remote environment, doing a lot of planning around that. And I think what you're seeing now is districts rolling out schedules and announcements to their students and to parents in their local communities, looking at how to put in place their continuity of education plans and potentially prepare to be closed even longer.
What kind of guidance has the administration given regarding whether online education can be provided or even perhaps required?
You know, it's changing day by day, hour by hour. There's a ton of guidance coming out both at the state and federal level. You can imagine an awful lot of questions from districts in a lot of different ways. We are providing and we're getting a lot of guidance, and districts are getting a lot of guidance around how to provide various services. There's still some questions, I think, on complying with some of the federal requirements under IDEA, but that, I think, is slowly coming into focus. And I think districts are trying to compare some of the preparation that they had done in advance of the governor announcing a continuation of the closing through April 6th to where they are now.
Who determines whether online education moves forward? Is that a local or state decision?
Local decision, but clearly, as we're looking at a longer closure through April 6th, you see, I think, just about every district moving in that direction if they haven't already. I know, just speaking for my district that I live within, they've been very good at communicating out to parents and students their plans, and even in the initial days of closing when schools were closed, they were still providing some guidance and support. And I think you're seeing not just the districts, but a lot of supporting organizations providing resources that students can use during this closure, and a lot of different ways that parents can continue to help their students.
How do schools address children with special needs who may have an IEP through their intermediate units?
Well, I think that's one of the things that you see the local intermediate units working on now, and PDE's guidance, and of course that plays into some of the federal guidance. I think it'll depend on the IEP. A lot of conversations around how to best be able to provide those services. Obviously, we want every child to get all the services that they need to make sure that they're getting a high-quality public education. But in light of the questions around COVID-19 and the precautions that need to be taken, I think a lot of people are looking right now at how to, protect students, protect families, and of course protect education providers as well. So it's a new challenge. We're in, I think, uncharted waters here, and really trying to figure this out as we go.
What advice or accommodations are being made for schools that lack rural broadband? I
think that people are just beginning to understand, the broadband conversation has been going on for years, and perhaps it now is finally coming into focus that this is a challenge that has existed, will continue to exist, but we're seeing the real-time impact of it with students that don't have access to rural broadband as schools potentially go to online classes. There's been some proposals out there to expand rural broadband. There have been in areas where it exists, but that it's simply families couldn't access it. There's been some companies stepping up to offer that. But I think, once we get through this, and I know everybody is anxious to get through this pandemic, I think we're going to have to turn our attention back to a much more serious conversation around rural broadband access for all students.
The governor called for waiving the 180-day school day requirement. Does that need to go through the legislative process to be formalized?
Well, the legislation that came out of the House, and I believe even as we're talking, is in front of the Senate, includes that. So I think this is one of those areas where both the governor, the Secretary of Education, and now the General Assembly are all demonstrating a commitment. They're on the same page. It's bipartisan, and it's going to happen.
Statewide assessments have been canceled for the year. Is there a financial impact for the state tied with that?
In terms of impact on the Department of Education or on local districts?
On local districts.
I think in as much as districts would have already been putting in place some of the preparations, obviously that's some lost time and resources. But of course, districts are still evaluating how that will impact end of the year. I think it's probably far too soon into this process to understand what the real impacts are going to be financially on districts. But the legislation that the House passed and the Senate's looking at right now does include various aspects that will hopefully keep districts whole so that we're not creating too deep a financial hole to crawl out of.
While schools are temporarily closed, will school employees and perhaps even charter schools continue to receive their pay?
Well, if you look at the legislation, again, I can't speak to it until it's signed, but the legislation in front of the Senate that passed the House does include language that would require all educational employees to earn, I don't have the exact language in front of you, but basically no more or no less than they would have earned during the school year.
Have you and your members had initial discussions about how the economic uncertainty from this pandemic may affect the tax base and how school districts are able to function moving forward?
I can say it really hasn't been at the forefront of any conversations currently. Again, an issue to look at as we move through the process. The attention really has been fully on how do we meet the needs of students, how do we meet the needs of families. When you look at the work that districts have done, they swung into action basically overnight when schools were closed, making sure that children were still going to have meals, and you're seeing that throughout the state with districts providing drive-through meal service. It's really been about caring for the students, educators, teachers, administrators reaching out to students, making sure that any kind of mental health challenges are being met. As you can imagine, a lot of anxiety with families and with students over this. There's going to be, I think, time later on to talk about what the long-term ramifications are in terms of district budgets, local tax base, that sort of thing.
How are you remaining connected with your members while schools are closed?
From the association standpoint, we've swung into action with a lot of different things. We have a daily summary email that goes out first thing in the morning. We've been doing one-on-one interviews with legislators and with board and superintendents talking about impact and what they're working on. We have provided free licenses for the next year to every school district in the state using a video conferencing webinar software package that allows boards and administrators to meet remotely, again, looking at the impact of social distancing while still knowing that the governance of districts needs to continue forward. We've put in place text alerts. Anything that we've been able to provide out, we've launched PASchoolsReady.com as a one-stop shop for resources and information. We update that basically around the clock 7 days a week right now. And, of course, we have a Q&A section on that website and through email, and we've been fielding many questions from members, and we respond to all of those within 24 hours individually and post answers up on the website as well. And then finally, we're conducting nightly webinars for members dealing with a range of topics related to this pandemic, and we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of school board directors and superintendents and administrators joining us each night, and they're able to ask questions of our presenters.
Have you received any indication from the administration whether it is their intention to have kids return to school at some point this spring?
I've not heard anything. I think that, if I'm going to read the tea leaves, and it's simply that, I think that everybody is trying as hard as they can to find a time in which districts can reopen and students can come back to school. I know that that's a strong desire from everyone I've talked to, but I think it's also taking it day by day. First and foremost is making sure that everybody is safe and school environments would be the right place for people to congregate. So I think it's certainly everybody's intention that we get schools back open as soon as possible, but I think everybody's erring on the side of caution and making sure that it's safe.
Nathan Maines is the CEO of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. We will be back right after this short break.
PCN offers Pennsylvania organizations, business, and associations the opportunity to have their message telecast statewide. Fusion on PCN is a platform for you to reach out to all of Pennsylvania using our statewide cable network and online streaming. You produce the content with your message, and PCN delivers it statewide. Fusion is a partnership that helps expand your reach and meet objectives through an alliance with PCN. Go to pcntv.com/fusion for more information.
After a great victory over Union forces in June 1863, Robert E. Lee marches his army to Pennsylvania. The advancing Confederates clash with General Meade's Union Army at Gettysburg, beginning the most famous battle of the Civil War. Explore our nation's past and the Gettysburg battlefield with the Gettysburg Collection. Become a member to stream the library online. Learn more at gettysburgcollection.com.
Welcome back. We are now joined on the phone by Kevin Shivers, President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers. Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Francine. Thank you.
Well, before we begin our discussion, for those that may not be familiar, who does your organization represent?
Sure. There are some 140 community banks that are operating in Pennsylvania right now. And, you know, the community bank philosophy is that all of the deposits that are held by those banks are then reinvested in the community through small business loans, home mortgages for local neighbors. And these community banks support a whole variety of charitable and community organizations in their hometowns all across Pennsylvania.
What is the top priority for community banks as this pandemic continues to spread throughout Pennsylvania?
Well, it's important for your listeners and your consumers to know that the banks are part of our nation's critical infrastructure, and they've been designated as such by the U.S. Treasury. And those federal guidelines also have been upheld by Governor Tom Wolf in his list of life-sustaining businesses and sectors. So it's important for listeners to know that the banks are essential and they're open, that bank customers have access to their money. They can do so online, at the ATM, over the telephone, and virtually every bank in Pennsylvania has extended their drive-up teller hours. And what's most important on the minds of these bankers is that, you know, your safety as a customer, the safety of their employees is top of mind. So if you have something that you think, boy, I really need to get into the lobby, I need to actually meet physically with a personal banker, we would encourage you to call your local bank first. Let's decide together, you and your banker, whether that activity can be done over the phone or online or through a drive-through window. And if absolutely you need physical access, maybe to access your safe deposit box, or you've got a loan closing, then the banks will be making those preparations for you to come in by appointment. Many banks are even operating using their parking lots as their extended lobbies right now. So there's unprecedented access to your finances. The banks have been thinking about this round the clock for the last 3 or 4 weeks before the pandemic actually took effect here in Pennsylvania, in this country, and they're acting on their protocols to make sure that their customers have access to their money, that the public has access to banking services, and that we do so in a very safe, efficient way to support both the customers and the employees.
What measures are being taken to keep both employees and patrons safe right now?
Absolutely. Well, for many banks, community banks especially, who are using, this is business with a handshake. That's the culture. And, we have some community banks that have literally shut their lobbies for the first time in 120 years. And that really was a culture shock to those institutions because they take that personal banking experience so seriously. But they realized that there was that higher good that was done through social distancing. And so what many banks have done is they've extended their teller hours through the drive-through window. They have redeployed bank employees so that there are a number of bank employees now that are serving the the teller windows. They have organized shifts among their employees to meet their customer needs. They're making sure that their ATMs are filled with cash so that bank customers can access those 24 hours a day. They're manning their telephones to serve their bank customers' needs over the phone. And there's going to be a really important role that banks are going to be playing here once Congress finalizes this $2 trillion stimulus package, if you will, which includes, I think, $350 billion in small business loans and other support for small businesses and working families in Pennsylvania. And community banks across Pennsylvania are going to be playing a significant role in that application process and making sure that their small business customers are serviced and that the public is able to cash their checks, open their accounts, access those funds. Because right now we're 10 days into the shutdown, this quarantine, and we're expecting another couple of weeks of the same. So the community banks are ready, they're positioned, and they're ready to help their communities bounce back.
Being that we're in a time of uncertainty right now, what kind of assurance can you give individuals that may have money in a community bank? What assurance is there of the security of their finances?
Well, for starters, their money is 100 and in their accounts is backed 100% by the FDIC. They're insured up to $250,000. And I have to tell you how pleased that our members have been working with their federal and state regulators. The new banking secretary designee here at the state level, Richard Vague, I've been on the phone with him, I think, 7 times with individual meetings with the banking industry here in Pennsylvania over the last 2 weeks. We just had roundtable conversations with the Federal Reserve. We have meetings set up with regulators from the U.S. Treasury, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and we're scheduling other meetings with the FDIC. In the past, under normal circumstances, whenever a bank would make special exceptions or special arrangements for business lenders or business borrowers or mortgage holders, they would be punished. The regulators would actually downgrade banks who tried to make special arrangements for their borrowers who are struggling. That's not the way it exists today. These banks are being backed up by the federal and state regulators who are instructing them to do everything they can to be flexible in meeting the needs of their customers. So if you are a small business and you're shut down, you're worried about making that next mortgage payment, or you've got a loan payment coming due, you don't know how you're going to make payroll, I would encourage you to reach out to your local community bank that's servicing your loan, and to see what kinds of arrangements can be made to defer payments or to extend loan terms, et cetera, to be able to assist, because that's what these community banks are trying to do right now with all of their customers. And it's great to hear that the federal and the state regulators are working with them to make sure that we support our communities.
What advice would you give Pennsylvanians to be careful that they don't fall to scams or cyber crimes in this time of uncertainty?
Well, that's exactly right. It's really important for consumers in Pennsylvania to be vigilant that, here we are in this, time of crisis, and that there are some really bad people out there that want to exploit that. So, we encourage you to be skeptical of the emails that you get, to make sure that they come from the institutions. Also, call the bank back. You have other numbers in your Rolodex or on your refrigerator. You can access your bank. The numbers. Just don't automatically click on an email that you receive, and recognize that keep your account information, in a safe place. Don't share that information with people. Take good best practices. There are great resources that are available on the FDIC website, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's website. There's also great information on the State Department of Banking and Securities website for consumers, and you can pull that information up to access it about what you can do to protect yourself. But that is going to be a big concern at this point. But what's most important for your viewers to realize is that our banking system is sound, it's safe, that the federal government, the state government are working with community banks to make sure that their deposits are available, that banks are making sure that customers are safe, that employees are safe, and they're showing their strength right now. Our community banks are showing their strength through this coronavirus crisis.
That's all that we have time for right now. Kevin Shivers is President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
We will be back right after this short break.
Tired of unbalanced views and networks pushing their own angles? PCN brings it to you straight. We don't edit what was said to fit a point of view. We bring you the entire event. No slant, no editing, the whole story. A complete view without the angle. Watch PCN on cable and on the PCN app. Stream politics and policy on your favorite device for free.
Take a nostalgic look back at some of the best games PCN has televised over the past 20 years with PCN Sports Classics. Watch the entire game without interruption and get updates on key players and coaches who have made Pennsylvania sports history. Watch new episodes monthly and stream the full series on demand with the PCN Select streaming service. Visit PCNTV.com to subscribe. PCN, proud to bring Pennsylvania sports to you.
Our final guest today is Secretary Robert Torres from the Department of Aging. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Francine, for having me on your program.
What are the biggest concerns of Pennsylvania's older adults during this coronavirus outbreak?
Well, I want to let your audience know that we have nearly 24% of our population are older adults over the age of 60, so that's slightly over 3 million. And our department provides essential services for that population, particularly nutritional support, meals, protective services, home services to help them stay independent and supported, especially if they're alone, and prescription services. So we offer a wide variety of information and referral services, along with long-term care ombudsman services.
What senior services that are usually provided by the area agencies on aging are being curtailed at this time?
Well, they're not being curtailed, but we have, as part of the governor's mitigation actions, we've had to close senior centers and adult day centers. But one of the things that the area agencies on aging did was provide me with contingency plans to support individuals who may not be receiving a meal as a result of those closures. So they've looked at alternative means of providing support through either takeout meals, switching them to home delivery meals, and making sure that their daily needs are being met if that was part of what they were receiving at the senior centers.
Particularly for seniors that may be reliant on these senior centers for their social interaction, what is the agency doing or encouraging to prevent social isolation during a time that people are living under a stay-at-home policy?
Yeah, part of what the area agencies on aging are doing are they have plans to contact consumers that they're regularly engaged with to make sure that, as this stay-at-home order is in place, that they are checking in, making sure that their health status is okay, making sure that if there's additional support needed, that they are aware of that and can get them the help that they need. We also provide protective services. That's another important, and that's still operational, 24/7, 365 days of the year. If there's any signs of abuse of any kind, the area agencies on aging and their staff that support those functions are still working to make sure that any serious allegations are being investigated and acted on.
Now, since you mentioned the issue of the older adult protective services, how is your agency providing these services at a time when people are being encouraged to do social distancing?
Well, we've relaxed some of the rules in terms of face-to-face contact. Typically, our regulations require us to personally interview someone who may be a potential victim of elder abuse. We're only requiring face-to-face contact where there's serious allegations of bodily or physical injury or sexual abuse, for example, and encouraging the area agencies on aging to do as much as they can over the phone, request records, medical records that might be needed through secure messaging or faxing. So we're trying to be responsible and make sure that we're not putting any of the staff, the protective service staff, or the older adult at risk with more contact than is necessary.
The Department of Aging also administers the PACE program for prescription drug coverage. What is the agency doing to make sure that seniors can remain current and perhaps even stocked up on the prescription medicines?
Yeah, that's been a big concern, getting seniors getting their medication during this time frame. What we've done within the PACE program is relax a rule that we have where 75% of a current prescription has to be used before you could request a refill. So we've relaxed that rule to alleviate those concerns. We're also working to make sure that pharmacies can deliver to the older adults, so to, again, support them staying at home and not venturing out unnecessarily. We also have a program that's called the Patient Assistance Program Clearinghouse. So even if you're not a PACE enrollee or don't qualify because of the income limit, you can still call the PACE program. They do an excellent job of helping individuals that are having problems with their medication or the cost of their medication. So I would encourage older adults who may be having some problems to reach out to the PACE program.
Do seniors need to take any action if they want to request an exemption to stock up on their medicines?
They do not at this time. They just have to. It has to be authorized by their physician. The only exception would be opioids or controlled substances. That those kind of requests will manage on a case-by-case basis. But as long as their physician is authorizing a refill, they shouldn't have a problem getting them filled.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Robert Torres, Secretary of the Department of Aging, thank you for joining us, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Francine. Take care.
That's all time we have for today's show. Coronavirus Impact airs on weekdays at noon and 8 p.m. It's also available on PCN's mobile app, Facebook, YouTube channel, and on our website, pcntv.com. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.